On a lonely Ohio road, a 19-year-old girl sat stranded in her wheelchair, watching cars rush by without stopping. Just when she thought no one cared, a 25-year-old mechanic pulled over. And what happened next would change both of their lives forever. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Emily's wheelchair slowed to a stop on the side of a quiet street in Ohio, the gentle hum of its motor fading into silence. She pressed the joystick forward again, but the chair didn't respond. The battery was gone. She sighed, staring down the long stretch of road ahead of her. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving only the orange afterglow fading into darkness. She was stranded, alone, with no way to move forward. 19 years old, full of dreams for the future, Emily suddenly felt very small in that moment. Cars passed by quickly, headlights slicing through the growing night. Each time a vehicle approached, she raised her hand slightly, hoping someone would notice her. But each driver seemed too busy, too distracted, or too uncaring to stop. Emily watched taillights disappear into the distance again and again. She hugged her backpack against her chest and bit her lip to hold back tears. It wasn't the first time she'd felt invisible, but tonight it hurt more. Her phone was in her pocket, but when she pulled it out, the screen showed no signal. She groaned, realizing she couldn't even call her father to come get her. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but sitting in a powerless wheelchair on the roadside at night made her feel vulnerable. She whispered to herself, maybe no one cares anymore. Maybe kindness is just a story people tell. Her voice broke in the silence, and she felt a lump forming in her throat. Emily thought about the irony of her day. She had just come from the library, where she was studying stories about ordinary people making extraordinary changes in the world. She had always believed kindness was real, that strangers would help each other if given the chance. But as more cars sped past, that belief began to fade. Her shoulders slumped and her eyes grew heavy with exhaustion. The chill of the evening air sank deeper into her skin, and she wondered how long she would be left there. The minutes dragged on like hours. She remembered how her dad used to tell her, "There are good people everywhere, Emmy. Sometimes you just have to wait for them." She wanted to believe that, but doubt filled her heart. She glanced down at the still wheelchair, its wheels motionless on the cracked pavement. For the first time in years, Emily felt trapped, not by her disability, but by the indifference of the world rushing past her. Her faith in others was slipping away with each passing car. She looked down at her hands, resting on the armrest, her fingers trembling slightly. What if she had to spend the night here? What if no one came? Fear crept into her chest, making her breathing shallow. A gust of wind blew through, carrying dry leaves across the road. The sound strangely lonely. The world felt too big, and she felt too small. In that moment, Emily was just a girl asking for someone, anyone, to see her as more than an obstacle on the road. Just as she was about to give up, a pair of headlights slowed. She blinked, thinking she imagined it. But then the vehicle pulled to the side of the road, gravel crunching beneath its tires. A pickup truck door opened with a creak, and footsteps echoed in the quiet. Emily's heart raced. Was this safe? She couldn't run, couldn't move, couldn't even defend herself if something went wrong. For a second, she considered pretending she was fine. But before she could speak, she heard a voice. "Hey," the voice said, calm and gentle. "Looks like you're stuck. Do you need help?" A young man stepped into the glow of the headlights. He wore jeans smeared with grease and a work shirt with his name stitched on the pocket. Jake. He looked no older than 25. His hair was a little messy, and his hands carried the marks of someone who worked with machines every day. Unlike the others who passed, he didn't stare with pity or annoyance. He simply saw her human to human. Emily swallowed hard, unsure if she should trust him, but something in his tone made her chest loosen a little. She nodded slowly and said, "My wheelchair died. I can't move it, and my phone has no signal." Jake crouched down beside her chair, lowering himself to her level instead of towering over her. That single action made her feel safe in a way she hadn't all evening. He smiled gently and said, "Don't worry. I've got you." The words were simple, but to Emily they were everything. For the first time that night, Emily didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like a burden or a problem to be ignored. She felt like someone cared. Jake reached back into his truck, pulling out a small toolbox he carried everywhere. The sound of tools clinking together filled the air, oddly comforting. Emily exhaled, realizing that maybe her dad was right after all. Maybe there were still good people left in the world, people who stopped, knelt down, and chose to help when everyone else looked away. Jake carefully placed his toolbox on the ground and crouched closer to Emily's wheelchair. He ran his hand over the frame, checking wires and connections with a practiced eye. Emily watched him silently, her heart racing from both nerves and hope. The night air was still, broken only by the faint sounds of passing traffic in the distance. "Looks like your battery's drained all the way," Jake said after a moment. "But don't worry, I've got a trick that might just get you home tonight." His calm voice carried an assurance Emily desperately needed. She tilted her head, uncertain but curious. "You can fix it? Here, without, a workshop?" Jake smiled, brushing dirt from his hands. "I've fixed trucks on the side of highways, engines in parking lots, and even a lawnmower in someone's driveway. A wheelchair? Not too different. Electricity is electricity." Emily chuckled softly, the first time she had smiled all evening. It amazed her that this stranger, who could have just driven by, was here with sleeves rolled up, treating her chair like it mattered. Jake opened the battery panel and squinted under the dim light of his truck's headlights. The wires looked old, worn from use, and the battery showed no signs of life. "You've got yourself a dead heart here," he said, tapping the casing. Emily hugged her arms against her chest, suddenly embarrassed. "I've been meaning to get it checked, but money's tight." She regretted saying it out loud, but Jake only nodded with understanding. "Hey, don't worry. We'll get it running for now. You just need to get home safe." His kindness was simple, yet heavy with meaning. From the back of his truck, Jake pulled out jumper cables and a portable connector he usually used for car batteries. Emily's eyes widened as sparks crackled when he clipped the ends together to test. Is it safe?" she asked nervously. Jake laughed, his smile breaking the tension. "Don't worry, I've been zapped a dozen times. If it happens again, you'll just see my hair stand straight up." Emily giggled despite herself. The fear inside her eased a little, replaced by cautious trust. For once, the night didn't feel so cruel. With steady hands, Jake connected the clamps to her wheelchair's terminals. The moment they touched, a small spark lit up. Emily flinched but stayed still, watching closely. "Good," Jake murmured, adjusting the wires. He hooked the other ends to his truck's battery, and the entire setup glowed faintly under the headlights. He looked at Emily with a reassuring grin. "Okay, let's see if we can give this thing some life." She held her breath, gripping the armrest as he flipped a switch. The chair buzzed faintly, and her heart leapt with it. The sound grew louder, the once silent machine humming back to life. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. It's working?" Jake nodded, a satisfied smirk tugging at his lips. "Told you. Just needed a little push." Emily's throat tightened with emotion. It wasn't just the chair coming alive. It was the feeling that someone had cared enough to make it happen. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "Why would you stop?" Jake shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. "Because nobody deserves to be left behind. Not when I can help." Emily blinked hard, fighting tears that wanted to spill. She wasn't used to strangers treating her like this, without pity or hesitation, just straightforward kindness. "Most people, they look the other way," she said softly. Jake tightened one last bolt and looked at her with quiet sincerity. "Most people forget what it means to see someone as human. But my dad used to say, if you've got two hands, you've got a way to make life better for someone else." Guess that stuck with me. Emily smiled faintly, warmed by the simplicity of his words. He gently patted the armrest of her chair. "There should hold until you get home. Tomorrow, get that battery checked, all right?" Emily nodded quickly, grateful beyond words. She dug into her bag and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "Please, take this. It's all I have." Jake shook his head firmly, stepping back with his toolbox. "No way, keep it. Use it for your dreams, not me." His refusal stunned her. He wasn't doing this for reward, for praise, or even for thanks. He just cared. Cars continued to speed by in the distance, but Emily no longer cared who ignored her. The world, in that moment, had narrowed down to two people on a roadside in Ohio. A girl who thought no one would stop, and a mechanic who did. She tested her joystick, and the wheelchair moved forward smoothly, its wheels turning as though nothing had ever been wrong. Her laughter, pure and unrestrained, filled the air. "I can't believe it," she said, grinning through tears. Jake smiled, lifting his toolbox back into his truck. "Believe it. You're not stuck anymore." The night suddenly felt different to Emily, not cold or lonely, but alive with possibility. She looked at Jake one last time before moving forward. "Thank you." "Really?" He tipped his head modestly. "Get home safe." With that, he climbed back into his truck. Emily rolled forward, her heart lighter than it had been in months. What had started as a night of despair turned into proof that kindness still existed. And as she moved toward home, she realized one thing: sometimes strangers remind us that hope isn't gone, it's just waiting to arrive. Emily rolled her wheelchair into the driveway of her small home, the familiar porch light guiding her way. Relief washed over her as she realized she had made it back safely. Her father, Mark, stepped outside, worry etched across his face. "Emmy, where have you been?" "I was so scared," she explained quickly, her voice trembling with excitement and gratitude. "Dad, my chair died." Nobody stopped. Until this mechanic did. "He fixed it on the spot, Dad. He didn't even take money. He just helped." Her father's eyes softened with both pride and amazement. Mark ushered her inside, but her words lingered in his mind long after Emily had gone to bed. As a local journalist, he often searched for stories that revealed the best of humanity. He sat at his desk that night, typing Emily's account into his laptop. The words flowed easily, about a 19-year-old girl stranded, a world that ignored her, and one young mechanic who refused to drive away. By the time dawn arrived, Mark had finished writing, convinced the story needed to be shared. The article was published the next morning in the community paper and shared on its online platform. At first, it received a few comments of appreciation, but within hours, the story began to spread far beyond their town. Readers were captivated by the idea of an everyday hero, a 25-year-old mechanic who knelt beside a wheelchair when no one else did. Social media picked it up. People shared it with captions like "Faith in humanity restored" and "We need more Jakes in this world." Emily couldn't believe her night had become news. Jake, on the other hand, had no idea. He was back at work in the auto shop, covered in grease, focused on fixing a customer's truck. When his co-worker burst into the garage with a phone in hand, Jake raised an eyebrow. "You're famous, man." His co-worker laughed, shoving the screen toward him. Jake frowned at the headline, but froze when he saw Emily's name and read the words. The article praised his selflessness, calling him a hometown hero. Jake shook his head, chuckling softly. "I just helped someone. That's it." But the world didn't see it that way. Within days, local news stations reached out for interviews. A TV crew even showed up at the shop, cameras capturing Jake wiping his hands on a rag. Reporters asked, "Why did you stop? And what made you care when others didn't?" Jake gave the same simple answer each time: "Because she needed help. That's all." Anyone could have done it. His humility only fueled the admiration. People weren't just inspired by what he did. They were inspired by how little he asked in return. Opportunities soon followed. A nearby car dealership offered Jake a better-paying position, impressed by both his skill and his heart. A community college invited him to speak about kindness and responsibility. Even a non-profit organization dedicated to helping people with disabilities reached out, wanting to collaborate on designing better mobility support systems. Jake was overwhelmed. He hadn't wanted attention or praise. He just wanted to do the right thing. But now, his small choice on a quiet road was rippling out in ways he never imagined. Meanwhile, Emily felt a change within herself too. That night on the roadside had shaken her, but it had also sparked something. She had always wanted to make a difference, but never felt she had the power. Now, inspired by Jake's actions, she began volunteering at the local community center. She helped other young people with disabilities, tutoring kids and organizing activities. Each time she wheeled into the center, she carried with her the memory of one person who had seen her when no one else did. She wanted to pass that forward. The bond between Emily and Jake didn't fade either. Though their lives were busy, they stayed in touch. Sometimes he'd stop by her house after work to check on her chair, tightening bolts or adjusting wires. Other times, she'd bring him cookies she had baked, laughing at how he'd eat 3 before even sitting down. They had become unlikely friends, bound together by a night that had started with despair and ended with hope. Emily often teased him, saying, "You know, you're stuck with me now." Jake only smiled and said, "Wouldn't have it any other way." Months later, Mark attended an award ceremony where Jake was being honored by the city council. Families, students, and officials gathered to celebrate him. When Jake walked onto the stage in his work boots and worn jeans, the crowd applauded loudly. But he raised his hands modestly and said, "Please don't clap for me. Clap for every person who chooses kindness when it's easier not to. I'm no hero. I'm just a mechanic who stopped." The real heroes are the people who'll take this story and decide to act the same way tomorrow. The applause grew even louder, echoing across the hall. Emily sat in the front row, tears glistening in her eyes, proud of her friend. What had begun as a night of fear had become a turning point, not just for her, not just for Jake, but for countless people who read, watched, and listened. Kindness had rippled outward, proving that even one act could spark a wave of change. And as Emily wheeled out of the hall that evening, she knew one truth: sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest power to move the world. That night on a quiet Ohio road proved something powerful. Kindness is never small. A 25-year-old mechanic's simple choice to stop and help gave a young girl hope again and inspired thousands across the country. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who expect nothing in return, yet change everything with a single act. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Until next time.